Got a couple of questions that I'd like to put to you all. Given that the goal of this is to try and identify ways to have conversations about where you come from, what your background is, without you being on the receiving end feeling uncomfortable, and without the people asking the questions feeling uncomfortable. So how would you want to be asked where do you come from or what your background is? What do you think for you as an individual is a comfortable question to be asked?
I think it depends on the tone and context. What's the follow-up questions after that? If they're simply asking me, where are you from, full stop, and then with a certain expression on their face, then that's not acceptable. But let's say they were asking me, where are you from? What languages do you speak? Are you familiar with this culture or that culture? Then, are we likely to interact with, colleagues from that region, for example, on a regular basis? So that makes a lot of difference, and that makes it acceptable because they're not asking the question on the basis of finding negativity, but rather to find strengths in that question. But if it's a simple, where are you from question, then look down and start writing notes, then I would be a lot more curious and probably offended by, why are you asking me this?
Some of it's just conversation though, isn't it? I ask the same question of a lot of people, because if say somebody had an accent, I quite like to guess where they're from. But so if somebody asks me where you're from, I'd say, what do you mean? Do you mean where am I from in England? Where was I born? Or where my family come from? So so I would normally ask that, and then let's just tell them the bits. But I often ask people where you're from, because I have a thing about because having worked sort of internationally as well, I kind of like to guess, are you Danish or Swedish or Norwegian or something,
But
and I get it right sometimes.
Itself, isn't it, Jubek?
It's just curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. I have experienced that situations, and I think that's a really nice way to ask that question. For example, your name sounds not English. Where is it from? Or where is your accent from? Or if it comes in the conversation, I must say this: the question "Where are you from?" as one of the conversation open, I find it quite intrusive. So if it comes within the conversation, you ask them about, say for example, the situation that you just mentioned. I might start a new job, and we speak about my education or my background or my where I've worked before, and then eventually the question comes, where are you from? Then that's very natural. But otherwise, as Jubert said, questions like, for example, where is your accent or where is your name from? It's a lot nicer way to ask.
On the aspect of color, I think it's important again to understand that when people are asking, where do you come from? It's, why do you speak like this? Why do you dress like this? Why do you look like this? And why can't I place you? I must place you now. And we become attuned, I think, people of color. And I can't speak for women, but I'm sure women are attuned when, they're a director and someone says, oh, so where did you study? We can tell. We're not always right, but we can tell. And I have no problem correcting people or just ignoring the question or just turning it back on them and saying, oh, curious, where are you from?
And I think we mustn't lose the value of cultural interchange and how much we learn from that, because we're afraid to ask questions. So not everyone is offended by where you're from, and not everyone has, you don't have to answer, but you do have to, if you engage in that cultural exchange, you'll just be able to learn a lot more about your colleagues, about different cultures. So it depends on the context. You don't want someone to make a negative connotation surrounding what they hear from you.
Hi, I think the point about context is really important, and trying to understand the intent of the person. Although it's difficult to always second guess what somebody else's intention is, we are all intuitive, and I think if we can engender an idea amongst ourselves that we are trying to come from a place of positivity, then I think that's helpful from the outset. Not everybody, as somebody quite rightly said, has the exact vocabulary or the manner, puts across their question in the manner that perhaps we would feel that we would do it if we were in their shoes. But the point is, we're not in their shoes. So I think, first of all, it's trying to discern the intent. And then I think it's equipping yourself with a way to respond. I would sort of take it as in a gracious way, or a way that slightly takes the high ground is the best way I can sort of come across, to put it across, to try and understand where that question's from and how you can then portray yourself in a positive way, or perhaps the ethnic group that you're perceived to be in a positive way, so that whoever it is leaves you with, as best as you can provide, a positive answer, and therefore perhaps that will then lead on to something else, which is a more open and constructive conversation than otherwise might evolve if you perhaps perceived it from the outset in a negative way. It's not always easy to do, because sometimes you do sense that somebody's actually not being particularly nice, and it's not great when that happens. But if you go around with a negative mindset whenever anybody asks you a question like that, it probably leads to more negativity. And I say, try and break the cycle, try and be positive, try and turn it around, I think.
I agree with Boo on that. I mean, you can ask me where I'm from, and I think it's usually, you can tell the intent by the follow-up question, actually. No, where are you really from? which are that, because basically what they're saying there, yeah, even though I was born in Birmingham, I'm not really from Birmingham, I'm from somewhere else. Whereas, it's my family who are from somewhere else. So I think the follow-up questions sometimes can help to, anchor you in terms of where that conversation is going. And I agree with Boo, right? Your response to it, me, I shrug it off, right? And because I think it's important that I take the high ground and not go down to their level.
I had a patient today actually asked me, so where are you from? Right, but that was after we'd engaged for 15 minutes talking about different things and books, and essentially this patient wasn't able to take part in the trial, couldn't just send her home because she'd taken a 2-hour journey here. But then we had a very interesting dialogue. And then when she said that, so where are you from? Where are your family from? I thought, oh, great, this is part of the conversation. So again, I think people have touched on it, the spirit of the conversation, but if it's immediately, oh, where are you from, before you even know my name, then I know that you've already got a preconceived notion, and there's a gap, there's a knowledge gap in your mind that you're trying to, actually not even a knowledge gap, there's cognitive dissonance that you're trying to correct, and I'm the medium through which, I'm the vehicle through which that cognitive dissonance is corrected. So it's a form of abuse as well, form of emotional abuse. Whereas if we're having this amazing dialogue and you go, oh my God, I don't even know your name. Oh, I can't place your accent. Where are you from? Then it's like, mate, part of conversation. So I don't think people should even use it as an opener, to be honest. If it's part of normal conversation, then yeah, I think it's a lot more palatable.